Financial goals are often built on a simple expectation. Set a target, make a plan, follow it, and results should follow. In the early weeks, this expectation seems reasonable. There is focus, there is effort, and there is a sense that progress is finally under control. When progress slows, the explanation usually turns inward. Discipline slipped. Attention moved elsewhere. Consistency broke down. The story becomes personal, as if success and failure are mainly about character. But the outcomes are too consistent to be explained that way. The same pattern appears across different goals and different incomes. The first weeks are usually strong, the second month becomes uneven. By the third or fourth, behavior starts drifting back toward older routines. If this were mainly about personality, the timing would vary widely. Instead, it follows a familiar curve, as if each new plan is pushing against the same underlying forces. A goal is an intention. A system is what decides what happens when intention is not present. In the beginning, intention is present because attention is high, prices are noticed, small purchases stand out. The goal stays active in ordinary moments. Attention acts like a temporary engine, pushing behavior uphill even when the landscape underneath has not changed. But attention is expensive. Every financial goal competes with work, family, health, stress, and daily logistics. In the first month, the goal feels new, so it wins that competition. Novelty gives it priority. Over time, novelty fades. The goal becomes another responsibility, and it has to fight for space like everything else. That is when willpower starts doing most of the work. Willpower is not a stable trait. It is a limited capacity that gets used up by decision after decision. The depletion is not dramatic. It is cumulative. A long day, a tense conversation, poor sleep, and a crowded schedule all push the mind toward the easiest option. The goal does not disappear. It simply loses in small, repeated moments. This is where friction matters. Friction is any small barrier that makes the desired choice harder than the default choice. It can be time, effort, mental load, or social discomfort. Financial goals often depend on choices with friction. Cooking instead of ordering, waiting instead of buying now, tracking instead of ignoring, saying no when others say yes. Each friction is minor on its own. Together they form a slope. In the first month, motivation supplies traction to climb that slope. Later, when attention is pulled toward other problems, the slope does what slopes do. It pulls behavior back toward the default, not because the goal disappeared, but because the system never changed. Friction also hides inside trade-offs. A goal asks you to accept a cost now for a benefit later. The cost is concrete and immediate. The benefit is distant and uncertain. Even when the math is reasonable, the experience feels uneven. The present feels real. The future feels like a guess. So the system naturally favors choices that preserve comfort now, especially when the future reward exists only as a number on a screen. Over time, those small choices accumulate, and the gap between the plan and the outcome grows without any single dramatic mistake. To understand why, separate the plan from the environment. The plan is what you want to do. The environment is what life makes easy. It includes physical cues, digital cues, routines, and the people around you. If spending is effortless and saving requires steps, the system favors spending. If shopping is one tap and reflection takes effort, the system favors shopping. Behavior tends to follow what is nearby, quick, and socially normal, especially when the mind is tired. Most goals are written as if choices happen in calm conditions. They assume a person will remember the goal, compare options, and act deliberately. Real choices happen in motion. Between tasks, on commutes, while hungry, while scrolling, while someone suggests something spontaneous. In that context, the brain uses shortcuts. It leans on defaults. It repeats what it has repeated before. Goals that depend on constant evaluation are fragile because evaluation is rarely available all day. This creates feedback loops that are easy to misread. Early progress produces a feeling of control. That feeling reinforces effort, but effort also produces strain. Tracking and restraint create constant low-level tension. If the goal does not produce near-term relief, the mind begins to bargain. It looks for comfort. Spending is a reliable way to buy comfort quickly, even when the purchase is small. The benefits of the goal are delayed and abstract, so they compete poorly against immediate relief. The loop becomes stronger when life adds pressure. A minor emergency appears. Work becomes demanding. Social obligations stack up. The plan is stressed, and the system reveals what it was built on. If the plan depends on steady restraint, it breaks when restraint is needed elsewhere. This is not a moral failure. It is a structural handoff. The short-term resource that carried the first phase runs out, and the unchanged environment reasserts itself. There is another force that often stays invisible. Comfort zones. Many spending patterns are not about indulgence. They are about belonging and safety. A baseline lifestyle is a set of routines that signal normal life. Certain foods, certain conveniences, certain small escapes. When a goal cuts into that baseline, it can feel like loss. Loss weighs heavier than gain. So even a sensible plan can trigger quiet resistance. The system pulls back toward what feels familiar. That is why the failure point has a specific shape. It rarely happens on day 3. It happens when the goal becomes maintenance. Maintenance is boring. Maintenance has fewer emotional rewards. Maintenance is what happens when you are no longer excited, but the goal still expects consistency. This is where most plans break, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a series of small permissions. One untracked purchase, one exception that becomes a habit, one weekend that resets the next week. Then the old default returns quietly. Up close? That moment feels personal. It feels like a flaw. Structurally, it is predictable. Motivation carried the early phase. Then the system took over. If the system has not changed, it restores the old average. It is like water returning to the lowest path when pressure stops pushing it uphill. A goal that relies on constant force will always decay when force is unavailable. One reason systems dominate is that they reduce thinking. When a choice is repeated, the brain stops treating it as a choice and starts treating it as background. That is efficient. It also means that changing outcomes requires changing what repeats. A structural reframe changes the question. Instead of asking how to stay motivated, it asks what forces shape behavior when motivation is absent. Defaults matter more than intentions because defaults remain on tired days. Access matters because what is easy to access becomes what is used. Cues matter because what is repeatedly seen becomes what is repeatedly chosen. Incentives matter because small rewards delivered now often outweigh larger rewards promised later. A system does not argue with your goals. It simply produces the outcome its design makes easiest. This is why reducing friction is more reliable than demanding willpower. Willpower varies with sleep, stress, and uncertainty. Friction is stable. If a behavior requires repeated effort, it fades when life gets crowded. If a behavior is the default, it persists when life gets crowded. Over months and years, the average outcome is produced by what the environment makes easy, not by what a person promises in a moment of clarity. Over the long term, staying inside the same structure produces the same outcomes, even if you keep changing the goal. A new target can create a new burst of effort, but it cannot change the forces that create the baseline. That is why goals become seasonal. They appear with energy and disappear with fatigue. Each cycle teaches the wrong lesson, that the problem is personal rather than structural.